Hello, nerds. Oh, getting old. Bones don't work like they used to. Thank you for watching Generally Nerdy. This is your week in Nerdom Movies edition for the week of September 24th, 2018. This week we're making up for a little bit of lost time. I feel like movies was one of the longer ones last week, so there's not as much to make up for. But we do have updates on Joker and such, so let's hit the intro and then the things and the stuff, and yeah, we'll get to it.
Quiet on the set. Rolling.
Hi, I am Bitsy Telek.
Hey, I'm Hale Appleman.
I'm Walter Kane.
I'm Rene Aubergenois. Odo on Deep Space Nine.
Michael Dorn, Lieutenant Commander Worf, Star Trek The Next Generation.
Come and see me and hear me and talk to me and listen to me talk about myself.
Hey man, this is Kevin Smith, often considered generally nerdy, and you are listening to what is often considered generally nerdy.
On Generally Nerdy.
You're listening to
Generally Nerdy.
Generally Nerdy.
Generally nerdy.
So, big things first, I guess. The first bit of news is the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. We talked about it last week. We're talking about it this week. And if more stuff comes out in the next week, we'll talk about it next week. So, since last week's filming, we have received a couple of things. So some of those pictures that we looked at last week came from a screen test that was just I can't even remember what they're called. Arthur Fleck, I believe. Just Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck, and then like he's harassing the clown, and just we don't really know what's going on, if that's even a scene or if they're just screen testing to get lighting or whatever. This week, we received another, it's a similar picture as the bust that we looked at last week. This week, though, it's effectively the same picture, just with the Joker makeup, and I use the term the Joker very loosely here, because that is not any Joker I've ever read. Aside from maybe the early sketches that, if you watch Fat Man on Batman, now Fat Man Beyond, early in one of the earlier YouTube episodes, they go into the early sketches of the Joker and kind of the inception, and when he looked like a circus clown. And that was interesting. So I'm hoping that that's kind of what they're doing here. But it doesn't really look like that's necessarily the case, because we also got something from TMZ, which I'll try and link to in the description and maybe play on the screen somewhere around here, if it hasn't been taken down or whatever. But TMZ has a couple of takes from a scene in the subway, and Joaquin has the same makeup on. So but he has the purple suit, so there's part of the Joker we know there. Just the makeup is just throwing me off, man. I can't get around it. It's creepy and it's kind of effective, but everything we know about canonical Joker, even though again this very likely is not going to be much resembling the canonical Joker because it's an Elseworld story, everything we know about canonical Joker, the paint isn't paint, it's his skin tone. Yes, I realize that Heath Ledger's Joker had to paint his face on too, but we know that as its own self-sustaining universe, and it worked there. So it just doesn't seem to be connecting, I guess is a great, and very, very likely once the movie actually comes out and hits theaters, I will see what they were doing, and my hope, and actually this is kind of going around the internets these days, is that this version of the makeup is just going to be an early trial that the Joker goes through, and then eventually by the end of the movie lands on something more resembling what we know of as the Joker today, or basically forever. So yeah, it's creepy. It's very effective in that respect. It's just not the Joker we know. So that's kind of where the disconnect is. Are they paying enough homage to the source material by just putting him in his purple suit? And actually, you can see that this is a really interesting thing that as I was watching the clip, the subway clip. Joker comes out of the subway with a mask on. It's just a cheap, like, plastic, get it at Party City or whatever kind of mask with the elastic around the back. But it still has a vague resemblance to Heath Ledger's mask in the bank heist scene opening the Dark Knight. And if you pay attention to his mannerisms, if you pay attention to his mannerisms, when he takes off the mask, there's a definite Ledger-esque way that he's moving this character. The way that he's embodying this version of the Joker seems to be recalling the way Ledger did, at least in those opening scenes of the Dark Knight, the bank heist and so on. I am so torn on this movie for so many reasons. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a fantastic actor. I think giving the Joker a backstory is a horrible idea. I think that what they're doing with the face makeup is a bad idea. But I think what Joaquin is doing with the physicalization of the character looks brilliant, looks absolutely on point. So it's anybody's guess as to whether or not this is going to be worth a watch, especially this early in the process. As production continues, I would imagine we will get more leaks and we will see if and when the makeup evolves. And should that happen, we are definitely going to be talking about it here, but we don't have that information, so we're moving on to that other Joker movie that is somewhere in production. And that somewhere, it would seem, is they just finished the script. The filmmakers are Glenn Ficarra and John Requa? Requa? I don't know. They are the guys that they did a few episodes of This Is Us. They did other things that are slightly more nerdy but less notable. They are the ones helming this Joker movie, which is apparently, and we've talked about this before, this is going to be focusing on Joker and Harley's relationship. From what the little bit about the script that has leaked out, it seems that the opening, and they said that they're trying to combine Bad Santa, which is another one of their works, with This Is Us somehow. Though that doesn't really make sense. Maybe that's their two biggest works, so that's what they have to say in order for people to take note and listen to what they're trying to get across. But it seems a very weird combination. But the opening scenes, from what they've said, Harley tries to kidnap Dr. Phil because she and Joker are having relationship problems, and that sounds like something that they might do in the comics. I just feel like in the comics, Joker would just kill Dr. Phil once Harley kidnapped him. It just, there's, again, the Joker is such a hard character to do well on screen, because even though we have a visualization of him in the comic books, every person who reads those comic books still has a unique take on the character. So when you try and put that to life, if you when you try and make it this thing, and then you have three new interpretations, the producers, the actors, and the directors, and maybe even four, the writer, that just muddies the water, and he becomes less effective, and I don't know how else to put that. So yeah, they finished the script. It sounds like everyone in the studio liked what they've done with the story. They are also going to be directing it together. They're going to be directing this movie. And if you will remember, this is going to be the Joker movie that is part of the DC Extended Universe and not an Elseworld story like the Joaquin movie is going to be. So just something to keep in mind. The Joaquin story can effectively do what it wants because it's not a real Joker movie. This one, there's a little bit higher stakes. They're trying to salvage the DCEU still, and they're trying to correct Leto's very strange decisions from the Suicide Squad movie. So there's a lot on their plate, and there's a lot that they have to get done. I feel like Leto has it in him. Whether or not he'll be able to tap into it definitely remains to be seen. But he wasn't. I didn't hate him in the Suicide Squad movie. I just felt like he made a couple of very poor choices with the character, which are still feasibly correctable in this movie. So we're crossing our fingers. We're hoping he does better, and we're moving on to the next bit of news, which is Venom. So in recent trailers, I'll see if I can find it and get it playing right here. But in recent trailers, Riz Ahmed's character is going to be playing, is going to be bonding rather with Riot, which is one of the symbiotes that comes from Venom. So they call these other symbiotes Venom's children. There has been a lot of speculation on the internets if that's really the symbiote that he gets, or if perhaps he's going to be Carnage, because ever since we got those early production the production stills and the paparazzi shots and all that stuff, we've known that Riz Ahmed was going to be Carlton Drake, and there's been crazy speculation that he is going to be Carnage, which is Venom's most notable child. So, with them putting in the trailers that he's going to be Riot, there's been some confusion. Well, he was doing an interview with Entertainment Weekly, and they asked him point blank if he was going to be playing Carnage, if the symbiote he gets is actually going to be Carnage. And he really dodged the question. His response was, "I can confirm I'm going to be acting in the Venom movie." Yeah, that's almost verbatim what he said. He's going to be acting in the Venom movie. Yeah, no kidding. We already knew that. I don't believe, because we see him as a primary character, I don't believe we're going to get Venom in any sort of major capacity. I don't know who the symbiote is going to bond with, but I know I have the definite impression that if we get Carnage, and I feel like that's a pretty significant if we know we're getting a Riot. If we get Carnage, it's not going to be until towards the end of the movie, setting up the sequel, because they're really going in deep if we're getting other versions of the symbiote, and not Carnage first. Like they're trying to set up a world, so we're going to get at least one more movie, because I feel like this first movie is going to do good just out of pure morbid curiosity, which will justify them doing the second movie. Now, if there's a bunch of negative fan backlash from the first movie and then the second movie does poorly, that's going to be the end of the Venomverse, or the non-Spider-Verse, or however you want to put it. But if they tease us with Carnage and then make the whole second movie about Carnage, Venom fighting Carnage and Carnage being bonded with Cletus Cassidy like he is in the comics, that will set up a universe. That will set up everything that we want as fans, aside from the Spider-Man bit. That will set everything else up exactly as it needs to be, and it makes sense. Like, when I first read that Riot was going to be the one of, if not the only, other symbiote in this movie, I thought maybe that was a poor decision. But the more I kind of mull it over and the more I read about it, the more it makes sense. If we have a team, if we're building up to these other symbiotes, if we're building up to Venom's family, if you will, then the second movie gives us all of that room to fight the most notorious symbiote in the entire Marvel universe, because Carnage is the crazy one. Carnage is the one that kills all the things, and Cletus Cassidy is the most well-known host for that symbiote. So if that's the direction they're going, that totally makes sense, and I'm totally on board for that. Again, minus the Spider-Man bit. So this is something we probably won't know until the movie comes out, but that's not too far out now. We're actually just a couple weeks away from the release date, so we'll know when the movie hits, but I feel like that is the best, and from what they've shown us, a logical way for them to be going with this movie. But that's all we've got for Venom. Next and last, we are talking about Star Wars. Slightly meta Star Wars that we're talking about here. So if you remember, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they made the announcement that their plan was to release a Star Wars movie every year ad infinitum. That was going to be a saga movie and then a non-saga movie, alternating back and forth every other year. So far, they've done that, and to pretty mixed reviews. The Force Awakens was by and large positive. Rogue One, again, by and large positive. The Last Jedi, pretty negative. And Solo, somewhere in the middle. A lot of people didn't actually see it, so we can't count their opinion, but it's still lukewarm at best. Lukewarm, get it? So, Bob Iger, who is one of the big mucky mucks over at Disney, blames himself for the negative reception of the Star Wars franchise of late. He said that the one movie a year model was his idea, and now looking back, they feel like that was probably not done well and probably not the best strategy to go forward. So after we get episode 9, after we get the last Skywalker saga movie, they're going to be slowing things down. So we already know that the Boba Fett movie and the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie are both somewhere in early stages of production. This very likely bodes very, very well for both of those movies. He did mention the D.B. Weiss, the guys from Game of Thrones, their saga movies. He mentioned that those movies, they're taking their time to plan them out. They're not flying by the seat of their pants, which I feel like they should have learned with the Holy Trilogy. That's not the best way to do it. Sure, it can work, and luckily for George Lucas, it did that first time, but this time it's not working out so well. So, he didn't, however, mention Rian Johnson's his epic saga, his trilogy that he was promised back in November. So, is that still happening? Rumors are kind of swirling on both sides. Yes, he's still going. No, because of the negative reactions of Last Jedi, they took away his Star Wars abilities. That has not been confirmed one way or the other from Lucasfilm or Disney at all, so we can't say for certain. But it is interesting to think of if they're actually learning from their mistakes, if they're actually going to do better going forward, then I'm okay with The Last Jedi being relatively incomprehensible in certain respects. I'm okay with the lukewarm, again, I need to stop saying that when we're talking about Star Wars, the mid-ground reception that we got with Solo. Even though I feel like Solo was a pretty solid movie, wasn't one of the best Star Wars movies ever, but that's a whole different conversation. If they're going to be giving the movies time to breathe, and if they're going to space them out a little further and give them the time to be properly developed, not just this mishmash of what the heck is going on, then I feel like all of those negative fanboys are going to jump ship one more time and get back on board with everyone with the Star Wars universe. But I feel like the Jon Favreau series is going to be the first thing we see after episode 9. That seems to be the thing that is the furthest along in production, and they're going to need something to launch that app with, and that's the plan for Jon Favreau's series, is that it's going to be on the Disney app. If that does well, and it's Favreau, so I have high hopes, and definitely there's reason to believe it will do well. If that series does well, then they know that people still love Star Wars, because they've seen the dollars. Then we have to get the D.B. Weiss and Benioff, the first movie of their trilogy, because we know from what they've done with Game of Thrones that that's going to be great. That has to be the sequence of events. They can't rush another movie, especially if the two non-saga movies that they have in production are Obi-Wan and Boba Fett. Two of the most iconic characters, again, aside from Han Solo. They have to be handled with such reverence in order to maintain what little momentum they still have, that they cannot rush them. Unless one of those two movies falls into the D.B. Weiss, David Benioff universe, or their saga, their trilogy, whatever they're doing. If one of those two movies is part of that, then that should be what happens. But I don't believe that that is the case. I'm pretty sure they're doing something entirely separate. It has been rumored to be along the era of the Old Republic, so we're looking at something along the KOTOR games, even though those are technically mythology now. So, very interesting that Bob Iger would do such a thing and blame himself. Maybe he's trying to take some of the weight off of Kathleen Kennedy's shoulders, because that seems to be the focus of all of the fanboy hate is, oh, Kathleen Kennedy ruined Star Wars, even though she's been here basically since the beginning. Now that she's the one in charge, it's been ruined, and that's not exactly how that works, but okay, fanboys, you do what you will. But yeah, so that's all we have this week for movies, guys. Thank you very, very much for watching all the way to the end. What did I miss? What should we talk about next week? Let me know in the comments down below. If, though, you want to go deeper into the conversation, jump over to the website, generallynerdy.net. That is the place that you can go get all the freebies. You can get all of the social media links. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter and the Facebooks and the things. Or you can go over to the stores and get your own nerdy swag. All of that stuff is over on generallynerdy.net. If you would rather support the channel a little more directly, there is a Patreon, patreon.com/generallynerdy. We all know how Patreon works at this point, so 4 tiers. The lowest tier is just $1 a month, and that gets you a lot more extra content. So go check out patreon.com/generallynerdy for all of that. If you are new to this channel, though, click that subscribe button. If you like the episode, click the like button. If you are falling behind on your nerd news and you want to catch up, then click or tap that box right there to the left of my face to do that. But before you click that box, before you click any of those boxes over there, do any of the things or the stuff or the websites and the stores and the hey, then guys, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.